Hi, welcome to Bookie. Many people who have been to Europe are impressed by its high level of development and charming view. All the things there, whether it is a modern and trendy city, a quaint and elegant town, a tranquil and dreamlike castle, or the fresh and elegant scenery, are mesmerizing. It is as if Europe has been uniquely blessed by God. However, can you imagine that in the first few years after World War II, the European continent was plunged into disorder and chaos, intertwined with vengeance and degradation? As violence and hunger existed side by the side, the air was filled with blood and hatred. Although the war had ended, the future was far from promising. The continent had almost been turned into hell on earth. The causes of such can be traced back to the Second World War. At the beginning of the war, Germany invaded Poland along with other countries, and the Soviet Union sent troops to Poland to expand its influence in Europe. Similar situations occurred in many countries other than Poland. In addition to national wars of aggression and counter-aggression, there were two other types of conflicts that simultaneously occurred: domestic revolutionary wars and the ideological class wars. The three types of wars led to expulsions and vendettas within the European nations. Violent ethnic cleansing and civil wars occurred, along with the Soviet-led scuffles between the National Liberation Front and right-wingers. These latter two types of conflicts continued on for many years, deepening the rift between Eastern and Western Europe, which end up with the beginning of the Iron Curtain and instigating the Soviet-American Cold War. Savage Continent is the historical record of the period between the end of World War II and the beginning of the Cold War, and it is based on many historical sources. The book is an account of the years of darkness when the European continent was plunged into violence and chaos after World War II. The book discusses the causes and effects of vengeance that occurred among different nations and people. It gives reflections on the war and offers opinions on how to avoid conflicts. The author of this book, Lowe, majored in English literature at the University of Manchester. After 12 years as a history publisher, he embarked on a full-time career as a writer and historian and is now recognized on both sides of the Atlantic as an authority on the Second World War. He is the author of critically acclaimed works of history, such as Inferno, The Fiery Destruction of Hamburg, 1943, Savage Continent, and The Fear and the Freedom. Next, we will uncover the book through three parts as follows. Part 1, Post-War Destruction. Part 2, The Wave of Vengeance. Part 3, The Consequences of Vengeance. Alright, let's discuss the first key point, the destruction after the Second World War. Generally, historians tend to consider September 1, 1939 as the start of World War II, when Germany launched its blitzkrieg against Poland and later ended with Germany's surrender on May 8, 1945. For 6 years, under the constant bombardments of countless planes, artillery, tanks, and other modern weapons, the war left a harrowing legacy that caused unimaginable destruction in Europe. The destruction of the war manifested itself most directly in a physical aspect. After 6 years of fighting, the European continent was in complete devastation with ruins and rubble everywhere. In the countries affected by the war, countless cities were reduced to debris, and many public buildings and homes were burned and blown up. Dresden, for example, no longer resembled Florence on the Elbe but was more like the face of the moon. In Kiev, Ukraine, the vast majority of public buildings were mined when the Red Army retreated in 1941. While the rest were destroyed when it returned in 1944. Due to continuous uprisings in Warsaw, the capital of Poland, Adolf Hitler simply ordered the city to be entirely razed. German troops adhered strictly to the order to wreck the town. As a consequence, 93% of Warsaw's dwellings were damaged beyond repair, with soldiers also burning down the archives and the public library, and further blowing up the royal castle, the Saxon Palace, the entire complex of Baroque and Rococo palaces, the centuries-old cathedrals and more. Warsaw became a city that only existed in travel